So welcome to my channel, That's What We Call a Good Life. Today I'm going to be taking you on a tour around my allotment and around my home garden. Now if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because I'll give you lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year from my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now first of all, we're going to start off at the allotment, and I'm going to take you around a tour to show you what's been going on, and there's been lots and lots going on. But more importantly, I will be showing you around my greenhouse and the things that I'm going to be planting out, and giving you some top tips on how to look after your long seedlings, because I know lots and lots of you have been losing your young seedlings to slugs and snails, and while you're always going to lose them a little bit, you don't want to lose all of them. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of the things that I do to try and stop that from happening. So let's start off at the top. Now for anyone who follows me, you'll know that my summer house isn't the most glamorous summer house in the world. We had lots of holes in there, and there was a point where I thought I was going to come up here one day and all we would have would be a heap of tools with all the side panels down. So we had a very, very busy weekend where my husband and son came up and helped, and we did a lot of tidying up. So as you can see, it still isn't a glamorous summer house, but we fixed a lot of the panels, because most of the way, I think I had an empty panel there, an empty panel there, an empty panel there, and round the side. So we basically just made good with some reclaimed wood. So you know, it's not glamorous, but it does exactly what I needed to do. So you don't have to spend lots of money on an expensive summer house. This was one that someone gave me that I didn't need anymore, and every year we just make it good, and one year maybe I will get a new one, but it does what I need it to do, and that's the most important thing. So let's move over to the artichokes, and they've really burst into life. It's a really fun thing to grow because they're not easy to get hold of, and they can be really expensive. And much to my delight, this morning I noticed I've already got some artichokes forming. Now I grew artichokes for quite a few years, and I'm ashamed to admit that in the most part I didn't eat many of them, but I learned last year that you can eat them when they're smaller, and you don't have to cut lots of bits off of them. There's only a small amount of trimming that needs to be done. So they're too small at the moment, but they won't need to get too much bigger, and I'll cut them as baby artichokes and I will cook them virtually whole. So I just googled a recipe, and if you've got artichokes as well, it's a really nice and easy way of eating them, and really scrumptious as well, because they can be a bit of a faff to prepare if you've never prepared an artichoke before. But eating them small is definitely one of my top tips. So the blossom on my brand-new apple is starting to form, and some of it's gone. I haven't got any little apples yet, but as you can see, I've got blossom and blossom that's just finished. I've got a bit of blossom up there, so hopefully we'll start to get some little brand-new apples soon. But at the moment it's just bloom, or where the bloom's just finished. Got another artichoke there which isn't as far on as the other one, but I'm sure it will catch up. I've got my pear tree here, which there are some pears on there. There we go, there's some there that have just started to form. They're still really tiny, and they're almost disguised by the leaves, but there are some on there. So I'm really looking forward to these. I can't remember what type of pear this is. They don't really soften up that much. So generally I cook with them, so I pick them off and I cook them. I made a really nice pear and chocolate tray bake last year, which was absolutely scrumptious, and I think I made several of them, if I'm really honest with you, because it was so yummy and went down really well in my house. So we've got the rhubarb up here. As you can see, I've picked quite a lot off, and we've been doing lots of different things with it. I made the rhubarb curry, which was absolutely fantastic. It way exceeded expectation. I'm not going to lie, I nearly bottled it just before I cooked it, but it went down really well in our house, so it's definitely something that we're going to do again. It looks a little bit sad because we've pulled quite a lot of rhubarb off of it. It often looks like that, but it will grow back, so I will just leave it and more will come back throughout the year. A lot of people think, oh, is that it? It's not. Just leave it for a bit, maybe give it a little bit of a water if you've not had enough rain, although most of you are saying that you've had too much rain, but there will be more coming, I can guarantee. So if we move down, the raspberries, I've got lots of lovely bloom on them. I typically get my raspberries in and around Wimbledon time of year. So I've got lots and lots of little buds on there, so really good promise of lots and lots of raspberries, and I've got quite a few kind of scattered around here. And we did have a really good, our strimmer wasn't working, so even me, you know, when you go up the allotment and you bring your strimmer up here, you bring your lawnmower, guess what, neither of them worked. We did eventually get the lawnmower working, so we just mowed everything as much as we possibly could. So if you think you're the only one who tries to do a job and then can't do the job because the stuff doesn't work, you're not the only one. But we did manage to get plenty done, so we mowed all in and around here. We've actually got some cherry blossom on here, which is the most we've ever had. The few that I have had, the birds have always got. So I've decided to put some netting over it to try and protect it. Because one thing I can guarantee is the birds love cherries. Even before they've even formed proper cherries, they love the whole thing. So I'm hoping that this is going to protect them, and we will. I think I can actually see a little cherry there, look. Very little tiny one. So they are starting to form now, and I'm hoping that this will be enough to keep the birds off, but we'll just have to see how the year goes on. You'll have to subscribe and see future videos to see whether I get some cherries or not. So as we move down, we've got the blackberries here. These are always really good. They are a cultivated variety without any prickles on them, and they're the really lovely big blackberries, and are absolutely flipping delicious. Absolutely adore them. So really excited about them. And we've got gooseberries. Gooseberries are something that, oh my goodness, you have to cover. I don't know if anyone grows gooseberries and doesn't have to cover them. The birds will pick them off even when they're the size of a pearl. Honestly, it's ridiculous. That is why they're covered now, because we came up here a week or so ago and you could see where they'd been landing on them, and there was lots of little ones on the floor already. I thought, I literally don't believe it. And they absolutely adore them. So we've got some netting to protect those. The garlic is coming on nicely. Despite it looking a little bit yellowy, it could be rust, they could be starting to die off. They do need to brown off more. You need a good, you know, half, 2/3 brown from the bottom down. As you can see, they're starting to, that's not enough. So we've got at least another month on those, because I know a few people have been asking whether their garlic's ready or not. I mean, if you are curious, you can kind of like dig down to look at the bottom, but they don't look anywhere near ready to me. There is a bit of an arc, so if you leave them in too long, they rot. If you don't leave them in long enough, they don't swell out, because they swell out in that last little bit. So we've all been moaning about the rain, but hopefully that's kept the ground nice and moist. As we move over, I've also got some onions. So those are my overwintering onions, and they're not looking too bad at all. They were really nibbled, but they've come back again. So often, I think it's actually the slugs that do it, believe it or not, because you see the slug trails around them. But when they get to a certain size, they leave them alone, and generally they come back to fruition. These are the ones I put in the spring. These are the white onions, I believe, and they're looking pretty good. Just got to try and keep them weed free. And then there's my red onions here, which was the most recent lot I put in, and they're coming on really nicely as well. I had to cover those because the birds will nip them out when you've just put them in, but once they get to about that size, you're usually okay. I will be putting leeks over there, but they're still in the pot, and then probably the beginning of June I'll put my leeks out there. There's probably just about enough room there for my leeks. And I've got my potatoes. So these are my Charlotte potatoes. We mulched around with a little bit of well-rotted manure, so these are ones that they don't, you don't have to mound them up quite so much. As long as you put a little bit of mulch over them, they're enough. So we did that the other day, and when we did the mowing, we thought we'd put some of it on the composter, but we just put some of the grass clippings on here just to suppress the weeds, which you can perfectly do. You know, it's free, and it will stop the weeds from growing. I've got some, actually we'll do that on the way around the other side. I've got some lovely blueberries here, which I've not had any blueberries yet, but as you can see, there's lots of fabulous bloom. So I'm not going to lie, I am pretty excited about that. So needless to say, I've put a bit of net on it, because the last thing I want is the birds to go in there and get them before I do. A lot of people have been talking about covering things, and as you can see, I've got a lot of this green scaffolding net. I've used loads of different net over the years, and I find this really effective, and it's much cheaper than a lot of the other netting. It's much stronger, and it does what I need it to do with regard to keeping the birds off really effectively. I will put a link up on the screen if you want to get some, and there will be one in the description. I do have to tell you that it is through an Amazon shop that I have, and I do make a little bit of money out of it. But if you would like to get some, you're more than welcome to, or just source your own. I've got some asparagus tips in there, which obviously they won't come through till next year. But as they're in there and not doing anything, I'm actually going to put a bit more compost over the top and plant my fennel in there. I just started some off from seed at home. Well, that's my plan. I'm sure it'll be fine to put some because it's just like a surface crop really. But it just seems a waste to leave that completely empty for the whole year. So I'll be doing that a little bit later when the fennel comes up. I've got another lot of potatoes there, that's kestrel, and we use the grass to mulch those with. I think I've said before, you can mulch with all sorts of things. You can earth up using the actual earth that's around it. You can use the earth of your composters, you can use grass. There's so many things you can use to mulch over your potatoes that you don't need to be paying. I'm seeing people paying for stuff, and honestly there's plenty of stuff you can use for free. I buy things when I have to, but only when I really have to. I've started off some seeds here as well, which are doing quite well. Again, I've netted them because the birds will nip them out, the little buggers. As you can see, I've got quite good germination. I've got the Bright Lights chard in the second row. I've got lots of different types of lettuce in this row, and on the row right to the end here I've got beetroot. There's parsnips here, but they take much longer to germinate, so unsurprisingly none have germinated yet, but I'm not concerned about that because they do take longer to germinate anyway. And I've got my carrots in here. They're quite hard to spot because they're very fine, but they are coming through. So although I use the green netting for lots of different things, for things like carrots, because of the carrot fly, I get the Enviromesh. It is expensive, but it's so incredibly worth it. I've never thrown a bit away, and it will do the job you need it to do. It will stop the carrot fly from, you know, not completely, but pretty much, you know, it really does work. I'll put that on now and it will just stay on for the whole duration. I won't take it off until, you know, I'll dig them, I'll put it back when I finally start digging them up. But it really does do a job. Again, I'll put a link up on the screen there if you wanted to get some, and there will be a link in the description, but it is well worth getting. Also, if you're trying, when I do my kale, I cover my kale with that as well, because although you can get a little bit of white fly on some brassicas, and it doesn't matter that much, if you get lots of white fly on your kale, oh, it's horrible, I'm not going to lie. And you'll never completely eradicate the cabbage white fly, but you know, it really does help, and it makes it more enjoyable to eat. So as we move down, I will be putting some more stuff out on these covered out bits. I've got loads of squashes and brassicas back home, but at the moment it's just covered just to stop loads of weeds coming through. I've got more gooseberries there. I don't think we need to look at the next lot, but again, same thing, we've had to cover them because the pigeons were having a go at them. Yeah, and we wouldn't have them if we didn't put a bit of netting on them. So as we move down, and we've got a bit more allotment because my father-in-law, although he's still coming up here, he didn't feel that he wanted his own section, so he's still popping up and we're doing bits together and we're sharing the crops and things, but he doesn't want to be keeping his own crops. And we thought this was a really good opportunity to put some wildflowers in, because it's something that I've always wanted to do, and because I don't have enough space, I very rarely get enough flowers in. So we've dug this over, cleared it, and we've got a whole mixture of wildflowers and also some other packets that I had, and we just threw them in. From the surface it doesn't look like much happening, but if we have a closer look, there are lots of things that are starting to come through. It's difficult to tell exactly what, because I put so many different seeds in. But there's definitely quite a bit of activity going on there. So I'm going to move further up to the allotment and I will be heading off home. But if you've been watching my channel for a while and you feel like you're getting really good value, if you'd like to buy me a coffee, there will be a link up on the screen and one also in the description. Don't feel you have to, only if you really think you can afford it, but I wouldn't be offended if you didn't. If you just subscribed, liked and gave me a comment, I would still be more than happy. So we're now up at the little polytunnel we made, and I know I've had a few messages about how we made this. This is a broken trampoline. The two halves of the trampoline, we've got one half here, the metal circle, semicircle, and then the other half at the other end. Where the legs came out, we've just supported it with pieces of wood, so like that. and obviously hammered the poles into the ground as well. So we didn't cut anything with angle grinders or anything like that. It was nothing really fancy. We just used half of because it came in sections, half to do one end, half to do this end, some wooden strips in between, and then we just covered it with the scaffolding net, and we just used cable ties. So nothing fancy at all to put this together. You know, it's not the most glamorous one in the world, but you know, yeah, it didn't really cost us much at all to make this. So it's a really simple thing to do. And I think I put a request out, anyone got a broken trampoline on Facebook, and one of my friends replied, and she was glad that I took her broken trampoline away. So, you know, it was a complete win-win. If we take a look inside, I've got my 4 beans, which are looking absolutely marvellous. Loads and loads of bloom, and they are just starting to die off and form little beans as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I did actually wonder whether I was going to get much, because there was a point when it looked like the slugs were completely attacking it during the winter. But as you can see, it's absolutely flourishing, so I'm really excited. Got a little bit of purple sprout in there, and that's overwintered, which I'm hoping is going to start producing some sprouts soon. And I also popped a few peas in around there as well, and the reason I put them in there is because I find the birds can really attack them, and I'm hoping they're going to grow up the netting, but it's a little bit of an experiment, so I'm not entirely sure. And the last thing to look at before we head back to my home garden are the black currants. So we've got lots of lovely little black currants. Again, I will have to cover these. The birds generally leave these alone until they are more starting to ripen up. In fact, these seem a little bit taller than usual, but I will have to get these covered, and we are getting a lot more ladybirds this year. So I don't know how anyone else is doing, but you can see a little ladybird there. Lots and lots of people on the allotment are saying how many more ladybirds we've had this year, and I'm inclined to agree. I see way more than I normally see. We've got another one there. They must love the black currants. Try not to disturb it too much. Another ladybird. So isn't that amazing? They take, you know, they eat all the bugs that we don't want. So we definitely want to encourage those. So that's the allotment. I'm going to head off back home, and I'm going to give you some top tips on looking after your young seedlings when you plant them out. So we're now back in my home garden, and we're about to take a look inside the greenhouse, and also some of the things that I've planted out, and giving you some top tips on how to look after them when you first put them out, whether it be the cold weather or whether it's the slugs and dreaded snails. So to start off with, if we head into the greenhouse. It's looking a little bit tidy now, but literally a couple of days ago I came in here and it was an explosion of vegetables, and I thought I've really got to start to do something, and so I started popping a little bit of things out as well, and also supporting things. I must admit, this hung down the other day, so I've had to support this, my peas. So if you've grown any peas like me, I came in here the other day and that had flopped over, and everything was going crazy, so I had to do a quick makeshift couple of poles, bit of string to hold it all back up again. So whether it's cold weather or when to put them out, and wondering whether it's going to be affected, there's no hard and fast rules. It really isn't an exact science, but this is what I do. I generally keep an eye on the weather with the Met Office, and I'm looking for weather for the temperatures to be getting from 8 Celsius and above in the evening. Technically plants can take lower than that, but when they're really tender and if they're not really hardened off, you can lose them. But once you start hitting about 8 Celsius, things get a little bit easier, and you're more likely for your young seedlings when you put them out to survive. And I don't just put them straight out, I do harden them off, and by hardening off it means I either put them outside and bring them back in at night, or I put them in my cloche that I've got over here. So if we take a look at this, and I've got lots of things inside the cloche here. So these are the things that I'm going to get planted out first. So what I've done is I've taken some of the plants that are in there, I've popped them in here, and I do one or two things. During the day, I lift it up and get a bit of air on them, or I can actually, this is quite handy, lift the whole thing off and air the whole thing. So quite often, because I want to get these out really soon, during the day there's absolutely no worries about any harm being caused to them, because there's no cold winds in Kent today. So I would literally take the whole cover off so they get some proper air on them. That does one of two things: it hardens them off and they get some natural air on them, which is really good for their growth. But then I will cover them back up at night. When I'm getting closer to putting them out up at the allotment, I won't even cover them up, because I'm getting them used to being outside to go up to the allotment. right, so the first thing you need to do with the weather is keep an eye on it, and I recommend getting the Met Office app on your phone. Don't make any money out of that, it's just really amazing and it's free, because you can keep an eye on what the night temperatures are starting to be. And the other thing is the dreaded slugs and snails that we all hate and we all suffer from. There's a few things that we do, or a few things that I do. First of all, I generally start off more things than I need, because you're going to get a few casualties. Get over it. So if you've got a few spares in reserve, it's not so disheartening when you lose them. I also don't put them all out in one go. So I've put 3 tomatoes out there. Obviously they're not subject to slugs and snails probably. They're more likely if the weather got cold. I've only put 3 out. I've only put half of my beans out over here. So again, if the slugs or the snails get them, or the weather turns bad, I haven't lost them all. I've got another lot, exactly the same amount of that, and I've got more tomatoes in my greenhouse were something to happen. So one plan, don't put all out in one go. So always have spares, always have backup to put more out. And the other thing is, generally speaking, I find that if I look at the weather forecast and I've got a lot of dry days ahead, that's a really good time to plant your young seedlings out, because when it's really, really wet, I don't know if you've ever noticed, if it's really, really wet, all the slugs and snails are all out and your seedlings are more likely to get attacked. The opposite is for when you put seeds out. When you're going to put some new seeds straight into the ground, you want it to rain because you want them to get really, really wet and bedded in. But when you're putting young plants out, I generally look for a few dry days, and then I know they would have been in the ground. The stronger they get, they're less susceptible to getting eaten, or that's just my personal experience. So that's a really big top tip. Obviously there are some things on the market. There are nematodes, there are pellets, there's copper, there's beer traps, there's a whole plethora of things. I'm not going to judge anybody for what they use, and I don't think anyone else should do, because at the end of the day, whatever we do is poles apart from anything that you buy if you buy it in a shop, because we only put stuff on it when we really, really need it. So if you need to put something else down, or you want to try something else, that's up to you. Please do that as well on top of what you're doing. But just a general tip is look for a few dry nights, and they're less likely to get eaten. Now if you want to have a quick look inside here, so we're now in the greenhouse. As you can see, I've got lots of reserves in case the dreaded slugs or snails do get them. If not, I've got lots to share with friends and family. I started off quite a lot of herbs. I started off some basil, some coriander and some parsley, so I've split all those. They germinated way better than I thought they would, so I've had to split them up. I've also just sown some spring onions and some Florence fennel, or bulb fennel, I think that's the right name. So hopefully, I would normally put them in the propagator, but because it's so hot now, you can get away with just having them in your greenhouse to start germinating. And I've got a few others to divide up there. My Cape gooseberries are coming on really lovely, which is absolutely fantastic. I need to pot some of those on. I have put 3 of my tomatoes out in my greenhouse here. I put a little bit of tomato feed on them because, as you can see, they were getting a bit yellowy. The only reason they're getting yellowy, or mainly, is because the pot is so small and it's running out of nutrition, and they need to get in the ground is the simple answer. So I did give them a little bit of tomato feed to give them a little bit of nutrition. I also popped out my Nimrod cucumbers. I know a lot of people have trouble with their cucumbers because they can wilt really easily, and I've got to say they are a little bit sulky, I'm not going to lie. My top tip is don't, whereas with things like tomatoes, you sink them down in the ground a little bit more when you plant them, and that's really, really beneficial. With cucumbers, the opposite applies. So I don't sink them down, I plant them roughly to the level of the pot. And when I water them, I try not to water over the plant. I try to just water across the base, and I generally don't feed a cucumber as soon as I put it in the ground, because again, I find them really temperamental and really, really sulky. I will feed them at some point, but apart from anything else, they don't look yellowy, they don't look like they need the food. I just gave them a little bit of water. And I hope you've enjoyed the tour of my allotment and my home garden. If you'd like an idea of some of the jobs you can be doing in the month of May, there is a link up on the screen, and there's also one in the description.